Welcome to Inside Aesthetics, the world's leading podcast for injectors and cosmetic businesses. I'm Dr. Jake Sloan, an aesthetic doctor based in Sydney, and I'm joined by my co-host and good friend David Segal, an entrepreneur and an aesthetic business mentor. Each episode of IA showcases unfiltered conversations with guests from around the world. In a sometimes disjointed industry, IA aims to help educate and connect our global community to raise the bar for both our businesses and our patients.
To further support and educate our listeners, we offer a range of additional resources under our IA Patreon subscription service. This caters for injectors and business owners of all levels and includes interactive live Zoom sessions, webinars, hints and tip videos, private chat groups, and exciting future content to come. To subscribe to IA Patreon, head to www.insideaesthetics.com/Patreon or click the link in our podcast description. You should seek medical advice before undergoing any treatment or procedure, and these podcasts do not replace a professional and bespoke consultation. Hey guys, bit of an exciting announcement before we jump into today's episode. We are doing our first ever sponsored IA webinar, and we are joined by a company called Zytide, who are a Sydney-based company who produce and sell exosomes. Now, what are exosomes? What are exosomes, Jake?
Well, you better come to the IA Zooms and find out. Look, exosomes are new to Australia. If you're an injector or an aesthetic practitioner, you've probably heard about these things. Our American colleagues, European colleagues are already playing with them, but they are, well, I'm not going to give the game away, but they're a new modality of treatment, right. And the indications that we understand that we'll be using them for are mainly skin rejuvenation and also hair restoration. So that's interesting.
Yeah, definitely tuning in.
Yeah. So, you know, if you're running a clinic, potentially a new service that you can offer hair as well as obviously face and skin. We've got an expert all the way from Malaysia. And thank you again to Zytide for sponsoring us for this. We're branding these as IA Zooms, but it's a live webinar.
Right.
We have to have healthcare professionals only. So sorry if you're eager but not in that category. We have to be compliant. Mm-hmm. So when you register for the webinar, please just leave your details, and then we'll see you in the evening. But it's on the 18th of September.
Yep.
6:30 in the evening, Sydney time, or AEST. You're welcome to join from anywhere in the world if you want to stay up in the middle of the night and join us. It'll be going for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, but it'll be all about exosomes, how to use them, and then the product that we'll actually be selling by Zytide is called Examide.
Right.
So that's what we'll actually be using in Australia.
Okay. And in terms of registering for it, people just go, assuming follow the link in our bio and our Instagram is probably the best place to go.
Yeah, that's the easiest place to go to. So if you're on our Instagram, Inside Aesthetics Podcast, just click the link and you'll see a link to IA Zooms and you can register there. If you prefer Googling these things, just go to World Wide Web, insideaesthetics.com/Examide. All of that information, of course, will be at the end of this podcast description, so you don't need to remember any of that.
Well, very excited to learn about a new product. We seem to be spoiled at the moment with a lot of new things coming out, so
it's getting interesting.
Exciting. All right, well, enjoy the rest of the episode, guys. I hope we see you on the webinar, and enjoy.
Thanks, guys. David, this episode is probably 120 episodes overdue.
It's been a while since we've done a Beauty of the World, isn't it?
Yeah, and maybe we won't stop. Maybe we'll do more. Who knows?
Well, we'll see. We'll see what the fans demand. But I know that we covered part of Asia.
Yeah,
we did the subcontinent, which was the Indian region.
Yeah, that's right, with Rashmi Shetty. That was, I think, episode like 107, a long time ago. And so today we've got my good friend all the way from Singapore, Dr. Felix Li, and we're going to call this one The Beauty of the World, Singapore and Asia. And we're going to define what we mean by Asia.
Right.
Felix, how are you, my friend? And why don't you tell our listeners all about you, your practice, what you do, and then we can get into the topic of the day, which is the beauty of the world.
Well, I'm great. How are you guys?
We are good.
Yes. Hi, Jake. Hi, David. Well, my name is Felix. I run Dr. Felix Li Medical Aesthetics Clinic in Singapore. And we're a comprehensive clinic. We do everything aesthetics, but of course, we focus a lot on fillers, on non-surgical facelifts. And I've been in aesthetics for about 7 or 8 years. The focus on fillers kind of came by chance. I was invited to this MD Codes Leaders training all those years ago. And I I saw how it's kind of like changed my results, changed my practice, and I was delivering value for my patients. And I kind of just kept going down that path, and I've learned, I got myself better. And eventually I came full circle. I started training for Elegant Medical Institute, and that's where I met Jake.
Right. Okay. And I'll be seeing you in 2 weeks' time as well as part of that.
Awesome. So I'm looking forward.
And what were you doing before you ventured into aesthetics? So what's your background in medicine prior to coming to the dark side of aesthetics? What were you doing before?
I was a resident in internal medicine.
Sorry, what? Sorry?
A resident. So I guess you were just doing the normal rotations of medicine, surgery, all the rest of it.
Right. And what was the impetus or the motivation that sort of made you move to a completely different, some people don't refer to it as real medicine. They call it sort of, the dark arts. So what motivated you to go that way?
It's really by chance, it was really by chance. Singapore we used to follow the British system of medicine where we had specialty trainees. And then eventually we switched over to residency, the American system. So this whole thing created a lot of administrative changes. And there was just a batch of us stuck in between. So at that point, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to venture into this. I have to admit this, I never even really knew aesthetics existed as a field of practice when I was doing medicine. So I got into it and it was great. And as I said, over the years, I really found meaning to this work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, where did you learn? Who taught you? How long did it take you before you felt you were, I guess, proficient enough to then open your clinic?
Wow, this is like a interesting topic, right? I'm not sure how it's like in Australia, but in Singapore and many parts of the world, aesthetics is not a specialty. So you don't go through residency, you don't go through specialty training, you don't actually get taught in a structured way, which I guess means all of us learn our aesthetics very differently. You could learn it from a institute created by a vendor. You could learn it from your peers, your bosses. You could learn it from nurses. You could learn it on live through you guys.
YouTube.
And it's just, yeah. And it's just very non-structured, right? And so now I think there's more institutions in place where we are offering training to younger doctors starting out. So just to get them started on the right foot with structured training, I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. And the reason we chose you, Felix, or the reason I chose you is because we bumped into each other having a beer when I was at the airport about a month ago on my way back from Thailand, where we did the MD codes, and we got talking about this topic again. And I thought, okay, let's revisit this. But it also made sense to choose a doctor from Singapore because, I'm going there in a couple of weeks' time, but I've only been once before, but it's a very mixed population. Obviously, Chinese dominance, but then you've got a lot of European influence, Indian sort of, immigrants from many, many years ago. And it's kind of an interesting mix of people. And I wonder whether your exposure to that sort of patient gives you a better understanding of ethnic differences and, maybe more insight into what we actually mean by Asian patients, because you're going to see a whole different variety of Asian patients. Whereas, say you're in mainland China, you're probably going to see just Chinese people, but not much mixed race people. So hopefully that's a good background to where we started. Any other comments about the beauty of the world to remind people?
Well, I mean, this all started with, I guess, some comments we had from people around, the fact that we don't get trained more with people from different parts of the world. So when you go to a training session with Allergan, for example, it's generally presented as a Caucasian, middle-aged Caucasian face is sort of the generic sort of aesthetic that people are trained upon. And we obviously live in a very multicultural world now. We've got people with different ethnic mixed backgrounds and traveling and immigrating, and it seems like we need to educate ourselves more on how to approach different faces from different parts of the world. And it's not just about even someone's facial structure. It could be about, cultural influences or what's considered beautiful in different parts of the world, because that's as important as the actual physical limitations or nuances that people have to their face and their structure.
Yeah, definitely. So Felix, what's your clinic like? Who's your typical patient? Is it mainly Asian? Do you see, expats? Because, there's a lot of expats in Singapore. How does it work?
Yeah, first and foremost, I got to say, I agree so much with what David just said. It's not just the diversity in the faces, the structure, it's the diversity in their idea of aesthetics is so different in every part of Asia, and within a single country, like you mentioned, China's huge, and in different parts of China you get very, very differing patient types and patient expectations. Yeah, and like you said, Singapore is a very cosmopolitan city. We are predominantly Chinese, but there is a lot of influence. So structurally, we're Chinese, right? But our minds are influenced by traditional Asian values, and as well as Western, modern kind of like ideas. And we do see that in our patients today. I'll say in my practice, the majority of patients are still the middle-aged Chinese person. as you were mentioning, it's the vast majority of what we do, and that could be shaped a little bit because we are, as I mentioned, we do non-surgical facelifts more than anything else. So the age group of patients are more or less in the 30s, 40s, early 50s, and we see patients from every ethnic group, to be honest, including expats living in Singapore. This is where we get our Caucasian patients, but the majority of them are still local Chinese and of the age group.
Yeah, perfect. So I don't know if you can tackle this one because I don't want to. What do we even mean by Asian patients? Like, what area does that cover?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I think you sent me this infographic a couple of days ago. I thought that was great. Where we split faces into those from the north side of China, those from the south side of China, and in Southeast Asia, where it's kind of different because we have people from Indonesian descent, Malaysian descent, and the faces are just very, very different. I think Asian is just such a diverse kind of like word, and it's nice that we've taken out Middle East, Indian, so because they have very, very unique structures and needs as well. So I guess we're still talking about the more kind of like Chinese descent, where we are, which I think to maybe a Caucasian injector, that's also more of the Asian patients that you see. Someone of Chinese descent, someone with a let's say a smaller eyes, a flatter like bone structure, flatter nose, smaller retrusive chin, and maybe a stronger masseter. Actually, that overall face shape, I think it's more typically Asian, but it's such a difficult thing because it is a generalization. Asia is massive.
Yeah. I watched a couple of good lectures at A23 last week, it was, and that infographic that I sent you, I'll put it up on our podcast descriptions if I can, and we'll definitely give it to our patrons. But it broke down the Asian population into, through very big stereotypes. But like you said, Chinese, sort of South Asia, I guess, and then Southeast Asia. And the stereotype, I guess, from a non-Asian injector's perspective is that, like you said, the face tends to be wider, broader, stronger cheekbones, but maybe centrally, so the forehead, nose, and obviously the middle of the cheek tends to be flatter. So the relevance of that is that it gives you sort of potential different targets to treat that people might culturally or aesthetically want to treat. And if you don't understand that as an injector and you broaden an already broad face, I don't think your patient's going to be very happy. Is that fair?
Oh, it's absolutely true.
Because they use this really funny term. The lecturer, he said that culturally Asians, and again he used the word very loosely, they see a small face as beautiful. What does that mean?
I think it means more of a tight face. A face that's not sagging and everything's tight and compact together, rather than it being physically actually small.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Because like you said, if you have a small chin, which is quite common in, Asian patients, why would you treat that if it's already small and a small face is considered beautiful? That's something I couldn't understand.
Yeah, I think in terms of that, why chin augmentation is really popular in Asia is because two reasons. Firstly, a small chin gives you little support to the areas around the chin, and jowls and marionette lines is something that always stands out as the sort of like the sign of sagginess. So that's that. And the second thing is, I think when you lengthen the chin, it proportionately makes the face look slimmer rather than smaller. And I think looking slim is once again something that every Asian patient would desire.
Yeah. Well, it seems like they use toxins to slim more parts of the body, not only the face. They target calf muscles, because I know that some Asian populations can be, commonly have larger calf muscles. They get their traps done as well, and they seem to be very big on treating the masseters to sort of slim the face down. So what's influencing or driving this? Is this something that's come from within the Asian culture, or is this purely as a result of Western culture's domination sort of around the world with, TV shows like the Kardashians and Hollywood and all those sorts of influence? Is that what's driving this sort of want and desire from Asian patients, or is this something that's intrinsically already there?
Oh, I think it's cultural in the sense that media plays a big role. I don't think many Asians want to look like the Kardashians per se, but they want, but they want to look like K-pop stars, girls like Blackpink and all that, long slim limbs and slim face, that sort of aesthetic,
Do you think it's true that, and let's reflect on another population. We've got a lot of Persian friends, and we're Jewish, or I'm Jewish, and if you have a bigger nose, you tend to not want it. You almost want what you don't have. Yeah. And so is it sort of similar where if you're typically broader with big masseters and larger cheekbones, that sort of intuitively you want to change that? I don't know.
This is an interesting thing. My take on it is that I think maybe in 10 or 20 years ago, when aesthetics was just coming to Asia, a lot of people wanted to look more westernized. So they wanted higher noses, fuller lips, stronger chin, because they wanted to look more westernized, because the stars they saw on TV back then were Western stars, Hollywood stars, right? And over the years, this kind of changed, and now people are more sort of like, they want to look beautiful in their own identity. So they start identifying with Asian stars, like your K-pop idols or your Hong Kong movie stars, Chinese stars nowadays. And it's made the aesthetic become more inherently Asian than it was before, when you weren't trying to look younger or more beautiful, you were actually trying to look more Western.
Interesting. Yeah. So who are like the Kardashian equivalents in, say, China? Who's driving the trends at the moment for younger Asian girls?
Well, if you talk about China, I would say the biggest star, at least looks-wise nowadays. I'm not from China, so I think I'm not the authority on this. But if I've heard of them from here, they must be big, right?
Yeah.
So, there is this girl called Dili Reba. You can check her out. She's gorgeous. And she is kind of different from the previous, like, this other girl, Angelababy, who everybody wanted to be like.
Right.
Now, Angelababy is very, very perfectly beautiful, right? Her proportions and everything, it's just what, if you told somebody, draw a beautiful person, that would be it, right? But this Dili Reba is a little bit different, because she still carries her sort of like her ethnic uniqueness, and I think that's what identifies with the younger people nowadays.
I've just got a picture up of Angelababy, because I have to admit I've never heard of her. She looks young. How old is she?
I don't think she's that young. I'm not so sure.
Well, maybe these are old photos. Who knows? But she is beautiful.
Yeah.
That's Angelababy.
Yes.
Guys, we'll see if we can put a link to Angelababy at the bottom of the description. But yeah, okay, fair enough. So why, I mean, what about her were people aspiring to? She looks definitely young, but she looks slim. She's definitely doesn't have a wide masseter. She's got presumably a maybe augmented chin, so it looks a little bit more pointy. But
nose is quite narrow.
Yeah, and she does have a nasal bridge. So do you think that's real, or has she had treatment?
Wow, I mean,
you don't
my
know,
guess
right?
Is good as yours. they think about sort of like commenting on celebrity faces is we don't actually see them in person.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of like photos, images of them. So I can't really be sure, but I think the general aesthetic back then, right, was this flawless, perfect look. Whereas for as we kind of like progressed over the years, we are more and more, it's shifted towards a more individual kind of beauty, which is why I brought up the other China star that who just looks more ethnic, more herself, but still very beautiful. And I think that's what people are embracing nowadays.
Okay. So you said obviously you're not from China. I know you're not from China. You're in Singapore. So who's driving trends there, and what's different when you reflect on, say, mainland Asia?
So when I went to China for a tour for Elegant, we basically go to every city to speak. So we give like the big talks in maybe Shanghai or Beijing, and after that we go to every city and train in that city. And in that moment, I realized a few really, really interesting things. Well, first and foremost is that China is huge and diverse. Every city has their own sort of like facial structures, and they also have their own sort of facial aesthetics. And I thought one really, really cool thing that I realized is that what David mentioned just now, in a city like, say, Beijing, which is more closed, right? Everybody has a very uniform desire, like, this is what I want to look like, this is looking good. But in a city like Shenzhen, which is a port city, it's a trading hub, where you get influences from every part of the world, Western and Eastern. Now, faces are more diverse, and the sort of like ideal of beauty is also much more diverse, because now they have all these Western ideals. They have they just think very, very differently. So China's like just huge. And the other interesting thing about China is that in general, at least in Singapore's a very conservative society. In general, they sort of like push towards aesthetics, or like this ideal of beauty either comes from the patient herself or it comes from the doctor, right? But in China, there's a third like force in place. There is the influencer, and these influencers are huge. These influencers are many times bigger than stars, like traditional media stars, movie stars. They're huge, and the stuff they say will actually bring to action change in a lot of people who follow them. And I think that's kind of interesting because in China, if the doctor said, I think you should do this, but if you saw on their social media this influencer saying, well, maybe that, chances are you listen to the influencer.
Right. Interesting.
That's fascinating. I had no idea that there was such an influencer culture over in Asia. I thought it was something only we were sort of, because they've come under a lot of attack and scrutiny recently, and we've got some regulations that have come into place with social media, and so a lot of these influencers have had their influence curtailed by regulations, and it's actually quite surprising.
Do you know what My Little Red Book is?
No.
Felix will know. You can explain it better, but my understanding, it's an app where people, like the public, but obviously influencers will, maybe sort of leave a testimonial for, say, Felix's clinic, and that has massive power because it's almost like I guess like the TripAdvisor of stuff, but driven by influencers. Yeah. And so, that's rather than being on, say, TikTok or Instagram, My Little Red Book is big. So have I explained that well, or is that a really bad?
Yes, you have. I can tell you that in if we're talking about China still, there is not so much the clinics, but rather hospitals. These are like buildings with like 6 or 8 stories. They have aesthetics, dermatology, plastic surgery, dental, everything in a single building, and there is usually a floor, an office, right, for the back end guys to work. There are like entire teams dedicated to the Little Red Book.
Wow, jeez, that's amazing.
We don't have it here yet.
Well, it's here, but
Not
unless you're using the app, you'd never know about it, obviously.
Yeah. Okay.
I've had some of my Asian patients encourage me to be on there, and I'm like, well, how am I going to like run it? I can't write Chinese.
To give you some relief, like David mentioned, China is regulating the Little Red Book, which means words like the translation of, say, Botox or fillers, they either are completely banned or they get down regulated in the algorithm. So they do not want all this sort of like medical stuff to be commercialized or advertised upon on the platforms. But you see, when it comes to an influencer, it's really, really hard to control that.
Yeah, right. I'd say an interesting thing, and I don't know if you can confirm if this is true. Maybe a few years ago, I was offered an opportunity to go to China and work, but also train other Chinese doctors, obviously, how to inject. And they said it'd be really easy. And I was like, okay, fair enough, because obviously I can't converse with the patients. And they said, well, the way it works commonly in China is the patient goes in, has a list of, like a shopping list of what they want. and then they liaise with what they call a consultant, which isn't a doctor. It's like a salesperson, really. And then the salesperson comes in with a piece of paper, gives it to the doctor and says, this is what you're doing today. It seemed very strange, like very patient-led, like you said. And I mean, for various reasons, but that was the main reason I said, this is not medicine. This is not how I work. But is that true? And if so, what do you think about that?
I think it's, unfortunately, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. But the good thing is that that's changing. That's changing. When I'm physically in China, I can see that that's changing. Previously, the patient would buy the treatment before she's even consulted the doctor.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this for all hospitals, but there are definitely a lot of hospitals that are like that. So the patient comes in, it's almost like with a receipt, you know,
Yes.
10 syringes of Voluma, 6 syringes of Volift, and then you inject that based on what she wants. It was like this, right? But I can see now that this trend is changing. I think the big guys behind these big hospitals in China, they understand that this is changing, because previously the patients would recognize the brand. They're going not to see Dr. Felix, they're going there to see Clinic A. Clinic A is what guarantees them a good outcome. You see, but after a while, as time went by, more and more the patient is there for the doctor. They trust that doctor's skills, they trust that doctor's expertise. They've maybe heard good things, good reviews about this doctor. They are there to see him. And so obviously they want this doctor to make the diagnosis, and through that diagnosis prescribe a treatment that she can choose. And that's definitely what's happening in China currently. I think for the change to complete, it will take years, but there are more and more clinics now in China than there were before, and the hospitals are really feeling the heat in that sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, when I tried to explore it, and obviously I won't mention who invited me to go, but they were a wealthy individual, so they weren't a doctor, but they own the hospital. And the way he explained it, and I guess it makes sense, is he said, because China's had such a rapid economic growth, that really, you know, at least at the start of this, the treatments were really just a status symbol. It showed you had money and you could buy stuff. It didn't really matter how it went in as long as you got it.
Or how it looked.
Yeah, well, presumably you want to look good. But yeah, so it was almost like if you can afford, like you said, 10 mils of Voluma, that is your status. And obviously you find a good doctor to be able to use that somehow. But very weird, very backwards, I thought.
Yeah.
Back then, I wouldn't even say, I mean, what you just described, I wouldn't even say China is the example for this. There is another country where you're literally wearing that filler on your face to show this is how rich I am, you know. It's like bringing an expensive bag around. But that brings us sort of nicely into I think sort of like the Asian patient's perspective or expectation of aesthetics nowadays. You know, that this thing has completely changed. When I see a patient in my clinic, at least, and I counsel them for a treatment, and I tell them the upsides, the downsides, the barrier to treatment, right? It is rarely risk, unfortunately. It is rarely cost. Usually, the patient will bring out a photo on Instagram and says, "This is my friend, and I don't want to look like her. I met her at a party. She can't smile. And this celebrity, I don't want to look like her," because times have changed to the point whereby now nobody wants to look like they've got anything done. Yeah. So if they had a priority, it would probably be looking good, looking old, and looking done. So looking done is more worse than looking old to most people nowadays. And I think the sweet spot now is you wanna do treatments that kind of like keep you in that state that you feel like you're in. You know, you feel young, you feel energetic, your face not showing that. They want the treatments done to keep them in that state, you know, and not to look done as before, where we were wearing 20, 40 cc of fat in our cheeks.
Well, it's good to know you guys went through that cycle as well, because we've certainly had it here in Australia, and it's kind of seemingly still going in little pockets in certain patients. But yeah, there's been big pushback even from injectors to say, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. And, you know, you can argue whether filler migration is real or not, but we obviously know fillers last a lot longer through some of the studies and MRIs and ultrasound. So I think we've sort of learnt just as an art that, we've pushed things too far, and now we need to get clever about how we use these tools.
What do you think the ratio would be between patients that come to you who want to look enhanced, who want to change their appearance while still maintaining looking natural and not done, versus people that just want to look less old?
In my clinic, I would say it's probably half and half. If not, It leans towards the people who want to look less old. But the thing is, as I always tell my patients, I feel like regardless, you start with the treatments that help you look less old. Because just by looking less old, less tired, less saggy, oftentimes you look more attractive, younger, more energetic. You might look slimmer, you might look more contoured. And if that already satisfies your need to look more beautiful, you're done. See you in a year, right? And if on this point you want to now look more attractive and you want to look more attractive by having bigger eyes, or you want to look more attractive by having a more contoured jawline, a better facial proportion, then we can put those bits on for you onto the face that is already younger and less saggy. And I just find that whatever their pursuit is, less old or more beautiful, we kind of start off from the same place anyway.
Yeah. I don't know if you know much about Korea. I'm going in about a month's time, so I'm really interested to see it. But obviously there, it's really famous for sort of being transformational in terms of some of the changes that people have. And there, I guess it's, within the culture that, after your 16th birthday, you very routinely go and get your nose done, or have double eyelid surgery, or something obvious. And there it almost seems like if you don't do it, you're the weirdo. So where does that culture come from? Why is that aspiration so normal?
I have to say, Jack, you know a lot more about Asia than you let on. Okay. So this is an interesting thing in two topics. The first I would talk about is they did a survey on how much of your salary do you spend on something, and in terms of proportions. Or in Korea, it's huge to do plastic surgery. So the amount of money you spend on plastic surgery is a large portion of your income, versus, let's say, if you went to Japan, plastic surgery is like a tiny amount, and the big bulk is on skincare. And if you went to, say, Singapore, you have little in plastic surgery, little in skincare. You have more on aesthetic treatments, lasers, injectables. So I think that's a really interesting thing to begin with. In Korea, the sort of like that push actually comes from the fact that they aren't trying to look more beautiful for the sake of being beautiful or being confident. In Korea, they after your 18th birthday or you graduate, a lot of times it's not just that you want to go do this. Your parents are actually sponsoring you this. This is your 18th birthday present. Right. And the purpose of this nose or this double eyelid is not to make you more beautiful. It's to make you more competitive. So it makes you, they believe that looking better gives you a better chance at getting a good job, gives you a better chance at getting a good husband or wife. And the purpose of pursuing beauty and transformational beauty, as you mentioned, is really not for the sake of beauty, but for the sake of competitiveness. And that's a very unique culture as well.
They want to get the kids out of the house.
Yep.
Actually, I was speaking to an Asian patient yesterday, and we spoke a little bit about this, which is how I know. I didn't know all of this. I did do some research, and she said that I never thought about this, but obviously a lot of countries like maybe Korea or pockets of China, they're very, they're non-mixed. It's just Koreans, or local, should I say. And so it gives you that competitive edge to stand out from the crowd, I guess, if you want to put it in layman's terms. So, whereas here in Australia, it's very multi-ethnic, multicultural, you sort of stand out, I guess, just because you're from England or whatever. Whereas there, if it's just Koreans in Seoul, maybe, I can sort of understand the mentality you want to change in a way.
Point of difference.
Yeah, it gives you a point of difference. Fair enough. So what are some of the common things that your patients come in and ask for? We've touched on some of them, but maybe we break it down into filler requests first, and maybe we break it down into, different parts of the face.
I think the as I was mentioning, everyone starts off from the same sort of way. And to me, it's like this. Every face is different, right? To make beauty is different in every eye, and every face is inherently different. But everyone's face ages in more or less the same way. So we always start with lifting, with support. We want to get you less tired, less saggy. We want to make your face more contoured, tighter, and that is enough for a lot of patients. And I would say that is the bulk of the work we do. We call it the Felix's signature facelift. It's just a selection of codes that basically do this purpose. And after that, we start to treat things that may be, in the context of this podcast, Asian needs, right? So look at me. I have terribly small eyes, so, which is fine for guys. I think guys get it easy in general. But for the ladies, we want the eyes to look bigger, right? So before plastic surgery, because as I mentioned, Asia is still more conservative. At least this part of Asia is more conservative. People want to look at non-surgical options to make their eyes appear bigger, perhaps, and that would maybe be fillers around the eyes, whether we're talking about temples, roof, behind the oculars, oculi, into the teardrop, cheekbones, cheeks, all of this stuff working together to give the eyes a bigger, brighter appearance. I think that's one. The next thing I would do would be more commonly would be in the lower face. Once again, it's a typical Asian thing. We have smaller chins, and a lot of times these chins are sort of like back pointing, so they're small and kind of like just backward. So now we want to project the chin. We want to give it length and projection. At the same time, we don't want to give a pointy little witch's chin, which is just very non-aesthetic. So now we're working on the jawline as a whole, to kind of like, it's not so much to project the chin, but to kind of give the entire lower face contour something more smooth, so it's not broken. It's like a smooth contour from chin to ear, and that also fits in very nicely with Asian aesthetic. I think this was a study done a couple of years ago whereby they got 9 different face shapes and got non-medical people, large number of them, to vote what's the most beautiful face shape, and I think about 60% voted for the oval shape or the reverse egg. And in general, lifting or lower face augmentation tends to help you get towards that general ideal.
We spoke a little bit about sort of the face and small face and cultural sort of likes and things. Is it true as a generality? I'm sure there's different likes everywhere and each patient's different, but I was always taught for Asian and also for Middle Eastern patients, they don't tend to like to see any light and dark sort of contrast. They like to have what they call a moon face, where it's just sort of homogeneous. They don't like angles. Whereas, your typical Caucasian patient, they like structure, cheekbones, defined jawline, and that sexy sort of hollow is desirable. So is that true?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. But once again, as I mentioned, Asia's really diverse. So there is that Caucasian aesthetic, right? Angles, lines. Basically, I feel that the aesthetic is nice, kind of the Angelina Jolie look, because the highlights are even more highlighted by the shadows. Yeah. And that gives structure and shape. And then there is this very traditional, what they call it, it's not really a moon face. The moon face sounds kind of negative. They call it the baby face. Right. So the idea of the baby face is that there are no hollows from cheekbone to mid-face to nasolabial fold. The entire thing is one smooth curve. But the problem is when you kind of overdo that, it goes into this other word that they use in China called looking like a bun. Do you guys have buns? Yeah. Chinese buns, right? So where we are now, I think in Singapore, is we're right in the middle. We're right in the middle. We kind of respect the need for the face to have its original structure, and we understand the need for this smooth, perfect sort of skin. So we're kind of in the middle when we work on this, but it also depends on where in China, where in Asia, and the particular patient you're talking to, whether they're leaning more Western, more Eastern, but the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. But this really becomes interesting when it comes to men, actually. This really becomes interesting when it comes to men, because in general, when we age, our faces kind of sag and the fat moves down and out, so it kind of broadens it. So any treatment that we do that lifts this face is going to move the face in and up. So in general, you're getting that oval ideal, right? But as we know for men, that may make you look less masculine, right? Less powerful, less authoritative. And interestingly, in Asia, there are 2 kinds of demands for male aesthetics. There are those who want that oval shape look, that sharper, more gender neutral look, and then there are the men who want that very strong, powerful look, and that's another interesting point to explore.
Right. So, in terms of your assessment process, can you just take us through how you sort of assess your typical patient face, and then maybe we can lead on to, some advice for potentially injectors outside of Asia who encounter Asian patients, because we've got a huge Asian population here in Australia, from not just China, but from Japan, Thailand, they're all over the place. So it'd be good to get some pointers from you, maybe some advice on how they should be assessing a typical Asian face. I guess maybe I can't use the word typical, but maybe some of the more common faces that you would encounter, and just to help them assess and treat them more effectively and more in line with what their aesthetic goals are.
Yeah, I'm guessing this has been said to death, so I'll go through the first part quite quickly. I feel like before we do any treatment for any face, we are always trying to make the face appear younger. So we want the face to look less saggy, less tired, overall lifted, and I think that's the first step, regardless. And after that, in my practice, I frequently do this. Tell me about the treatments you've done before, and then when they tell me I've done this, and I'm like, okay, can you tell me if this treatment satisfied you or it did not? Because sometimes they will say, I've injected Profhilo, it did nothing for me. Now, to me, Profhilo obviously does its work. It gives you skin hydration, it gives you better, smoother skin. But when the patient says it does nothing for me, it tells me that skin hydration isn't what she's looking for, right? So if I say, what have you done before? I've done Thermage. It was really good for a few years, and in recent years, I really don't see any difference. So it tells me that skin tightening is a priority for this patient, but skin tightening may not fulfill all her aesthetic goals anymore, and now we have to look at something else. So I think going through like what they've done before gives me a good idea as to what she wants and what has satisfied her before and what she thinks is not enough, and we try to kind of like fill that gap. The other thing would be the standard, if you don't disregard the treatment, the actual treatment, just tell me 3 things you would change on your face, right? And I find if the patient tells me 3 things that are related to aging, so I want to improve my nasolabial folds, I want to improve my marionette lines, my jowls, this is easy. This is easy because we're confident, right, with what we do to lift the face, to improve all these signs. And I feel like nowadays as injectors, we have to kind of look beyond how our patients look like immediately after treatment, as well as how they look like a week or a month after treatment, but rather how they look like a year after treatment. And I think this whole, like Jake was saying, lifting is like a dirty word. When you say the word lifting, everybody's going to argue with you. Does it not? How could it? But I thought COVID gave us a really wonderful lesson in the sense that in Singapore, we stopped all aesthetic treatments during the period. So when the patients came back, they were 2 or 2.5 years away from their last injection. And it was really interesting to observe that all of them still looked better than before. So there are many ways to explain this. As we've been saying, the fillers may last a lot longer than we think they do. There may be an element of scarring, fibrosis that's keeping the lift there. But I just feel like when you do fillers in a certain way, the shape and structure and volume of the filler isn't the result. So like if we injected a lip, the filler itself is the result. So when the filler's gone, the result's gone, we do it again, right? But when we do fillers in a certain way, I postulate that the filler is not the result, right? Because you see the results in a lot of parts of the face that the filler was not injected in. So then it could be the movement of the fat under the skin or the movement of the skin by the filler that is showing you that aesthetic change. And if that's the case, that result may be something that lasts longer than the longevity of filler itself. So I think no matter what, right, we always start with that. But if the patient comes in and her 3 main goals are not related to aging, right? I want to have fuller forehead. I want to have a higher nose. Then we kind of explain that we want to first make your face look young, make your face look sort of like attractive, right? Then we will give you that sort of differentiating factor, that highlight that you want, because it's going to look weird to have a high, sharp nose on a saggy face. And sometimes it's easy to communicate this truth to the patient, sometimes it isn't. But I think that kind of aesthetics is one of these this work whereby it's inherently subjective, it's inherently service orientated. The most important thing in our job, I think, is not to create the best results, but to create patient satisfaction, right? But the issue here is that the patient may not actually know what's best for her. So we gotta kind of like marry the science of what we know with the arts of listening to what she wants and bring it together to deliver that kind of final results.
It's really nice to hear someone who basically does the same as me. Like, I can tell you've done the MD codes basically, because what you're saying for listeners who haven't done the MD codes is you're listening to the patient's wants, but you're kind of steering them in a nice way to their needs rather than just doing what they want, because they can look weird. If we do exactly what they say and go back to that Chinese consulting model, you sort of just get a smorgasbord of weird stuff on a face and it just looks odd.
It's like you're going to a McDonald's drive-through.
Yeah.
So this podcast is being listened to by people all over the world. Predominantly our major listeners are in Australia, United States, Europe, UK. And so we've got very multicultural societies, a lot of Asian immigration and many generations of Asians have now sort of moved in and had children, and we've got, Asian Australians, but they've still got the genetic background and they still present as Asian physically. And so a lot of them get lost when it comes to treating people, not just Asian people from different ethnicities who they haven't seen in their training before, they haven't had a lot of experience with, and they're presented with this patient, and quite often they can become quite lost, especially for new trainers new injectors or those that don't have a lot of experience. So as an Asian injector and a thought leader, what advice would you give to non-Asian providers in treating an Asian face who might feel a bit lost or not sure where to start to make sure they're assessing correctly and then meeting the patient expectations and doing justice to the facial structure and not trying to butcher it by trying to apply a Caucasian aesthetic to an Asian face, for example?
Right. So I think primarily, as we were talking about just now, a lot of Asian faces are flatter towards the middle, right? So a lot of times the patients will come in with requests such as, I want to fill up my cheeks, I want to have apple cheeks, or I want to improve my nasolabial folds. I think these are very, very common requests. But what we must always remember is that when we volumize an area, we have to see how it affects the face as a whole. So if you think of the face as like a ball, when you inject in here, you're kind of like pulling it down. And when you inject out here, you're kind of like pulling it up. So there is that overall movement of the face to wherever you inject. So this becomes a problem because the Asian patients will point to you, I want volume here, I want volume here, I want volume here. And these are all sort of like weight. So on one hand, you want to make them happy. You want to give them the volume in the places that sort of like smoothens the hollows. So it smoothens that transition between highlight and hollow, which makes them look more baby-faced, younger. But at the same time, you want to remember to support whatever it's caused by aging and to support as well what you're injecting. So typically, if someone asks me to inject her cheek, for example, to give more apple cheeks, to give more fullness in the cheeks, I would first start with injecting the cheekbones, start with injecting in front of the ear. So I give that lift and support. And then I'm going to volumize the cheek and give a little bit of volume in a place which is sort of anatomically logical, in an amount that is anatomically logical, knowing that I have supported it from the side. The same goes for teatrals, eye bags. So before I inject in the teatral, I would always like to give support to the area through injecting the temples, the roof, below the orbicularis oculi to give support, and then I feel. And this sort of like reasoning goes down as well to the lower face, right? Marionette lines, it's such a tricky thing because the marionette line isn't, or the nasolabial fold for that matter, it really isn't a line or a hollow. It's because the cheek's kind of like sagging onto it that's creating that line. So before I would consider filling any of this, I would always do this. So whether I'm injecting cheekbones, preauricular, whether I'm injecting jawline, I've always put support, and then whatever hollow I have at the end, we'll fill that up.
So just to translate, because you sort of went off mic there, Felix was basically saying start laterally to support that medial descent, nasolabial fold, etc., which I completely agree with. So in some ways, treating all faces has a similar, I guess, chronology and stepwise process. But the worry is that if you're not careful, you could widen an already wide cheekbone. But I think, using small volumes, you can actually make a face look slimmer, not wider.
Yep. No, 100%.
Yeah.
The goal always is to make the face look smaller, in my opinion, than to make it bigger or puffier. In fact, I have something I always say is that I feel like if we injected a patient and the way we're talking about injecting, we're talking about a significant number of syringes, which means a significant budget for the patient. There is an expectation of improvement. So I feel like the sweet spot is if you took the before and the after photo, you have to see a big improvement. You have to see this patient definitely looks much younger in the after. But it's equally important that if you only had the after photo, you met this patient at the party after injection, you cannot tell in any way that the patient has been injected before. And I think this comes down to injecting anatomically, in the sense that you could, the ideal, of course, is to put stuff back where they came from rather than to create new stuff. But if you're creating new stuff, it has to be created in a way that is anatomically possible. This person could have been born this way. It's possible, rather than creating something that is completely impossible. Which I'm surprised you haven't asked me about. More the latest trends on the little
we'll get there.
We'll come to that. Don't you worry.
I was just, before we move on, I was just going to say, is there any sort of anatomical sort of nuances or things that people need to look out for or allow for? So, for example, I know that typically Asians will have like a thicker dermis. And so does that impact your injecting technique in terms of depth, in terms of risk of things like occlusions? Or I'm just sort of talking more from a layperson's perspective, or people that are, still fairly new. Are there sort of things that they need to allow for, just in terms of not more the aesthetic, but more the technical application?
I think I can think of two things to this. The first is, as you mentioned, a thicker, more sebaceous dermis. Generally, you want to, if you are trying to lift, generally you want to choose a product that has a stronger cohesivity, because this product is going to withstand the weight of all the tissue on it. So if you want it to move the tissue its way, it has to be able to withstand that weight without being crushed. So I think a product with a strong cohesivity would be more ideal in such patients, versus, say, a Caucasian whose skin is more thinner, more sensitive. You may want to use a smoother, softer product to achieve sort of like the same result. But as it comes to nuances, I'll say this in a way, I guess I'm Asian, so I can say this without being racist. All Asians have flat noses, okay? Almost all. If you're excluding the Indians and Middle Easterns, in general, we have flat noses. And this leads to a big problem in two ways, in the sense that nose augmentation is one of the most commonly requested aesthetic procedures in patients when it comes to transformation. But at the same time, as we know, nose injections is one of the most dangerous places we could inject in the face. And this comes with another problem. So let's, in the first place, injecting anywhere in this area will always come with that tiny but potentially catastrophic risk of blindness. And in Asia, where the demand is so high, you can imagine that this becomes a problem, a danger, right? And the second thing is, in an Asian aesthetic, you don't just want the nose to be high, you want the nose to be slim. So if you're injecting filler and you're injecting very sensibly, a small amount, not too frequently, barring the dangers of blindness, of vascular complications, you should be fine. But the problem is, because the bone is flat, if you want to create that ideal nose that the patients want, then you may be injecting more, you may be injecting more frequently. And even if it is incredibly rare to get a vascular complication, it is incredibly common to see patients walking around with trunks on their noses. It literally looks like a trunk, because no matter how well you inject it, right, the filler will spread a little. Right, even if you choose the filler with the best, structure, it will still spread a little. And when you do that many, many, many times, it tends to spread, and you get this trunk that makes the eyes look close together. And if you already have small eyes to begin with, that looks even worse. So, when you inject an Asian patient's nose, you will get great feedback from her. She will be so satisfied, but you have to be really, really sensible in treating her this time and also every time for the rest of her life.
Right. So the filler migration?
Well, it's not going for a walk. It just
roll into the side. Just rolling to the side of the bed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Felix said earlier, when the fresh filler goes in, there's I guess, a mechanical shaping to the tissue. But what happens after that is the filler has an influence on the tissue. It draws water. You maybe even get collagen and fibroblast stimulation. So something happens after that.
Yeah.
And so, it's not just the filler that you're seeing.
Yeah, but when you say it doesn't go for a walk, I mean, it doesn't really need to. You're talking about a nose, which you're talking about millimeter precision. I mean, we've got good friends that are rhinoplasty surgeons, and the difference between a good nose job and a bad nose job can be millimeters.
Yeah,
so it doesn't take much when you're dealing with that central part of the face where every millimeter can make such a huge difference.
Yeah. Now, not to teach people how to do nose filler in a podcast, but yeah, let's do it. No, but what's your sort of preferred technique? Because, there's a debate over using, fine microboluses with a needle versus a cannula in a different plane. So what's your preferred technique?
The not going blind technique.
Yeah, well, that one.
Well, I have to be really, really honest and say that in all patients that comes in for nose augmentation, I always give them the option, right, to go for rhinoplasty. Because I just feel like this is not a matter of like turf, I want your business or not. I feel like the best and safest way to augment an Asian nose is surgical.
Yeah.
The other option that it's politically weird in Singapore right now, but an option theoretically would be to do a thread lift in the nose.
Right. Yeah.
So the thread lift is kind of it kind of like solves both the problems I brought up earlier, because on one hand it won't broaden the nose, and on the other hand you can't go blind from a thread lift. But it doesn't mean that thread lift is without complication. It does have, right? And the other issue is that if you have tissue, because a thread lift works unlike a filler, it works by, it's kind of like molding the tissue you have there. But in some Asian noses where this part is entirely flat, there is nothing to mold. And if you persist in putting threads, what you get is this really thin little tube over here that looks incredibly strange. So it's a safe option for most people, but you have to be also careful of patient selection.
Yeah. Do you know anecdotally, or maybe even you've got the data, are there more blindnesses in that part of the world? Because, probability, you're just doing more noses, more foreheads as well. It's another big one.
I think the issue with blindness is that reporting the case can be something that's sensitive, and so we often get very unrealistic numbers.
Yeah.
The truth is, I think that I don't know what it is compared to the rest of the world, but as you say, if you keep injecting in the nose, you will eventually run into this problem. But one good thing about Asians is that, unlike Caucasians, there is very little request to inject filler inside the sort of 11 lines nigrobella.
Yeah.
So we kind of dodged that, but we're still injecting the nose.
Right.
But lots of foreheads as well, which is, again, it's not a common treatment that your average injector here in, Sydney is doing for non-Asian patients. Sometimes people need it, but in your sort of demand for treatments, I'm assuming it's a ubiquitous thing. Everyone knows that they want a good forehead. It's just culturally desirable, whereas we don't have that really here.
Yes, there are two kinds of forehead demands. One kind is for the forehead to protrude. I don't know if you know of this. There are some Chinese people who keep a certain type of fish. It's an ornamental fish,
the koi?
And it has a massive forehead.
Oh, right, okay. No, I don't know that.
So there is that demand, which I think is a trend, which fortunately has kind of passed us by, which is good. And the other demand is for the forehead to just be flat. Because you know how when we age and there is like a hollow here,
yes,
and it just makes you look really old. I think that filling that up so the whole thing is flat is a very common demand in Asia, yes. And the other thing that we're mentioning is that Asians in general have small eyes, right? So it is easy for small eyes to look tired, which means that if you are using botulinum toxin to treat forehead lines, there is a chance that you will actually sort of worsen that tired look in the eye. And a lot of times, if you treat the forehead with whether a filler or collagen stimulator, something volumizing, you could improve the lines to such a way whereby you reduce or you totally take away the patient's need to do Botox in the forehead. So I think there are a few reasons why forehead treatments are popular in Asia, but it is also worth noting that we never treat our patients' foreheads at session 1. because not because of risk or what, the risk is there, right? But because remember we were talking about how Asians have tiny chins, and if you have a saggy mid face and you have a tiny chin and you have a great forehead, that's just weird.
Yeah.
So it's all about it's all about balance and proportion. Yeah.
Yeah. Completely anecdote again, but how many mils might you use in a lower face? Because again, I train lots of injectors here in Australia, and I think your average maybe beginner to intermediate injector thinks that chin filler is just, one injection here in the middle of the chin, and you can kind of get away with it on someone who's got an okay-ish chin. They just want a little bit more projection. But what you're doing is you're building a lower face. It's quite different. And I think that some of our patients underestimate what's needed. So, how might you do it and how many mils might you typically use?
I'll say the most standard, I would say it's 5+2. Why I say 5+2 is because same reason as before, I'm not treating the chin if I haven't treated the cheekbone and the preauricular area. So this 2 is kind of like added onto it.
Yeah.
It has to be there. Whether it's there in this session or it was there before, it's got to be there first. And then in the chin itself, I'll go for 5. 5, that split sort of like 3 and 2. 3 syringes. The goal of these syringes is actually to sort of like, in the case of all patients, to kind of like replace bony loss, but in Asian patients in particular, is to create bony structure, right? So 3 syringes in the jawline mainly to create bony structure, and 2 syringes sort of in the soft tissue, whether we're talking about the crease or we're talking about the soft tissue in the chin itself, generally to create shape. So I think 2 plus 3 plus 2 is the general.
That's 7 mils.
Yeah, it's a lot. You know, your average patient's got to go, whoa, that's a lot of money.
And you do that all in one sitting, or do you sort of space that out over a number of treatments?
Yeah. For this one, I would do it all in one sitting.
Right.
Mainly because the product that I use, there is some swelling involved. Right. So you want to counsel the patient for the swelling, you want to counsel the patient for downtime, and you want it all at once, so it doesn't come like all the time. So they kind of like plan it into their routine. They're ready for this, and in a week later, it's all good.
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about filler. Let's just talk about toxin quickly. Again, I don't know if this is universal with Asian patients, but I have found the Asian patients I treat, they don't tolerate wrinkles very well. Even the most minor thing that they see, they want it gone. And I think that relates to, they want perfect skin. It's a really desirable thing to have good skin. So if you see a wrinkle, it kind of makes sense. Whereas, some of my Caucasian patients, there's lines everywhere and they'll focus on one line. It's kind of hilarious, really, when you think about it. So what do, your average patients that you see, what do they want with their toxin? You said bigger eyes, but what about wrinkles?
Yeah, in fact, right, I would actually, in my experience, it's kind of different, because my expat patients are the ones who will come every 4 months on the dot, the correct date to get their 64 units done. Yeah. Whereas Asian patients, they're lazier when it comes to toxins. So they come when they see the wrinkles come back. So this could be 4 months, could be 6 months, or the wrinkles could be back for a long time, but they just think it'll be fine. But, it's my end of the year company dinner. I got to come here for Botox now.
Right.
So they're actually lazier than the expat patients I get. I think wrinkles, at least I feel like sometimes as doctors, especially in practices like ours, where our patients inherently trust us a lot, our own beliefs kind of shape them as well. And to me, I'm always like, I feel like you should inject Botox only if the wrinkle troubles you, because wrinkles are a normal part of a human face of expression. And if it's making you look angry or sad or fierce, you should treat it. But if it's just there's no real need to treat it. And I feel like, because I come across this way, my patients become like this after a while, but the expats, they will come 4 months on the dot.
Yeah. I want to ask you something interesting. You mentioned the dose of 64 units as being kind of a common pattern, I guess. So David used to own clinics, and here in Australia, we very, very typically see across the whole country various packages of toxins sold to patients, like advertised. And a common one is 40 units.
55.
Another one's about 55. You're using 64. Which I know is like the classic on label. So 20 glabella, 20 forehead, 12 for each crow's feet. So do you actually do that? Is that common?
No.
Okay.
see, I'm not on the stage where I used to.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I can say this, I guess.
So how does it work in Singapore then? Like, how is it sold?
I think the bulk of the difference that I make is really in the forehead, because 20 in the glabella, 12 in the crow's feet. It's on label, it's evidence based. It works well for almost everybody. I think that's great, right?
Yeah.
The issue is about the forehead. Once again, if we have poor support around the eyes to begin with, I would actually start with filler treatments to support the eyes before even considering putting any toxin in the forehead.
Yeah.
Right. And that also brings us to lower forehead lines. Lower forehead lines, I would never inject it with conventional Botox in Asian patients, because we need that eye opening so much. When you have small eyes, you need this opening so much, and you can't just weaken sort of like the only elevator of the brow. So now that leaves us with this bit, right? I feel like in most of the time I'll start with the same M pattern, but with 2 units in each spot. So I start with 10. And if the patient's satisfied, I'll just keep it to that. If the patient's like, it's improved, but I want it better, I would then go up to the 64. So for me, it's either 54 or 64, but I tend to start with the 54, and I find that is enough to give satisfaction to the majority of patients without affecting their brows or their eyes.
I reckon if you asked your average injector, they would do the same. Even here in Australia, around 10, maybe 12, maybe 8, but not 20. What do you think?
I think injectors are becoming a lot more conservative with the forehead treatment. Yeah. Because of just drop brows and ptosis risk and things like that. I don't know. It seems like the injectors that I talk to are very conscious of overdoing the brow, and it's always something that's, I mean, Botox is easy to top up. I mean, you can come back in a couple of weeks and you can't take it out. So I think people, especially with new patients as well, that they don't know the face. True. You know, some patients it might present like clinically looking fine, but they might complaining of heaviness, or they feel like they're struggling to keep their eyes open. So sometimes it's not even something that just presents visually. It's the way the patients respond to the treatment. So I think that it seems to be moving in a more sensible direction, that people are being a lot more conservative with that area before they start going gung-ho with the toxin there. Yeah. What about lower face tox? Do you sort of, I mean, we sort of mentioned facial slimming with Masseter treatments, but you know, we did a really great episode with Dr. Michael Caine probably close to a year ago now. We're getting close to that. And he was talking a lot about, you know, that's almost like the forgotten region. You know, everyone's just focused on those 3 key areas, but not really paying attention to what can be achieved with lower face. So things like Nefertiti lift and teaching the chin, the DAOs, even sort of, you know, venturing down to the neck region as well. So do you sort of have much of those sorts of treatments in your practice? Is that something that your Asian patients are looking for as well? I guess particularly the Masseters, but those other areas?
Yeah, so I think for Masseters, it's very commonly requested in Asia. And I think this has to do with a little bit of a misunderstanding from what it was marketed as before. When it was marketed in Mandarin, it used to be called the slim face injection. So people think that by injecting a Masseter, your face becomes slimmer. But in reality, it does not. It becomes less square. So the point of injecting Masseter is really to make the face not like this, but like this.
So
right?
from square to V-shaped for the people who can't see this. Yeah.
Yes. So the goal is that shape rather than slimming the face. So that's one of the things I got to get the patients to understand. But it's popular for 2 reasons. Firstly, a lot of Asians, because we naturally have very big Masseters to support our small chins, some people have a medical problem with it, with bruxism. They have a lot of problem with grinding, which affects their sleep and their energy in the day. So we inject for bruxism very commonly. But other than that, the ones for aesthetics, the main thing is to sort of let them understand that we're taking the angle away from the jaw rather than making it smaller in any way. And if you do want the face to be of a certain shape, maybe you have to consider what we spoke of just now with the treatment in the chin and the jawline. Nefertiti lift is extremely popular in China. Right. I feel like everybody goes for it, like more commonly than skin boosters or anything else, but not so popular in Singapore. I think Singapore patients, as I mentioned, going to an aesthetic clinic is a thing. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get my face done. It's safe, you know. So they generally want treatments that last a longer time, which the Nefertiti lift does not. But in countries like China and Korea, whereby you go visit your aesthetic doctor like every month, it's an incredibly popular treatment.
That's interesting. So what's your average dose for a Masseter? You got a new patient, never been treated before. What are you sort of starting with for a nice chunky Masseter?
if it's nice and chunky, I push it with my thumb and pushes my thumb all the way out. I would generally do at maximum 32 on each side. And I would not do less than 8 on each side, because I find like that's no real point to do less than 8 for such a big muscle. So I would say between 8 to 32. The interesting thing about Masseter injections is that I find like the muscle, it kind of needs to work, to exercise, to build itself back. So if we injected, say, a big dose and the Masseter strength, and over the months you let it work, and it comes back 9 months, 12 months later, you inject again with another big dose, I find that's kind of like less satisfying. So what I generally do is I bring them back every 4 months, but every time they come back, I inject a smaller dose. So someone who started with 32 is eventually going to end with 8 or 0.
Right, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think, here traditionally, maybe injectors don't do it as frequently.
Well, and then this comes down to all the conversations we've had around resistance. And so people thinking that more common, there's that debate. Is it higher doses? Is it smaller doses more frequently that sort of cause the body to create a resistance, or is it an antibody that they create to it? Or
like an auto-antibody.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, what I will say is I think a lot of injectors here who maybe don't see as many masseters as you won't be confident to treat, say temporalis or pterygoid. They'll just do the masseter. Whereas if someone's truly grinding, you could actually make it worse by just doing the masseter and ignoring all the other muscles. So, just word of caution out there. If you're not sure what you're doing, just don't do it.
Also, as well, I think that culturally, there's a lot of women now who want that square jaw. They want that more masculine jaw, and that's just a cultural shift, I think, that's happened over the last 5 years or so. I mean, I've heard patients come into various clinics and say, give me the cash register drawer. They just want to look like, they want to look like Quagmire from the Family Guy. They just, I don't know if you guys have got that over there.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. I mean, so that seems to be culturally shifting as well. So I feel it's becoming less popular, but that's just anecdotal from people I speak to.
Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but at some point, Masseter will become on-label.
Okay.
I won't give you a timescale. And so it's going to become not in again because it's already in, but there'll be more focus on it being normal. Yeah. Because it will be taught rather than done off-label.
Yeah.
And I think the doses will be similar to what Felix is doing, to be completely honest. So, interesting. I mean, there's studies out there. Maybe we can find a study for you guys. Now, let's talk about kind of a big cultural thing for Asian patients, which is good skin. And I think this is the clear difference between, our patients are Australian sort of Caucasian patients that kind of almost ignore it often.
They want to be tanned. They want
to be tanned, but they don't understand the implications of how terrible that is. Yeah. So why is skin so, revered, I guess, with our Asian patients? I mean, it looks beautiful, but why is it culturally important?
I think this is something that is genetically imprinted into us. There is a old Chinese saying, I don't know. Okay, I'll say the first half of it, right? First half is inoffensive. So
no, say two halves.
Are you going to say it in Mandarin or English?
Yeah, we want the Chinese one first.
You want the Chinese one?
Yeah.
So the Chinese one says 100遮三丑, which means that if you're fair, it will cover all your flaws 3 times over.
Right. Okay.
And this is ingrained, in the culture. And the second half, unfortunately, but just for interest, it says 一肥毁所有, but if you're fat, it ruins everything.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Okay. So you see why we want to focus on the first part.
Yeah.
So the thankfully, the Asian patient of today, the modern patient, has moved away from the fair being the goal, looking white being the goal. Now what they want is, I think it's also because of sort of our cities becoming more diverse, more ethnically diverse. So now every skin color is more or less seen as beautiful. You could be Chinese and really fair, and people are like, "Wow, you're traditional beauty," right? Or you could be Chinese and tanned, and people will be like, "You look really healthy, strong." What I think the goal is, right, is evenness of that skin tone. So whatever color it is one even color across your entire face, which means pigmentation, blemishes, wrinkles, fine lines, open pores. These are the stuff that people really, really don't want. And I feel like with being Asian, having more melanin in our skin, we're kind of like more protected against sun damage as it is versus Caucasian. So we already have a better place to start. The problem is that being also more sebaceous, we tend to have more problems with acne scarring that may or may not be able to be completely treated, as you get older. So the gist is, I think the goal now is not just to look fair, right? Because fair is revered for centuries, if not, but nowadays I think whatever color you are, it's beautiful. The goal is to look uniform, perfect.
I think that the whole attractiveness to being fair, I think, goes back to just sort of the class system. If you were wealthy, you didn't work outside. If you were fat, you could afford food. So being fat and white was attractive. If you were tanned and thin, it meant you were of a lower class because you were physically having to work and you were out in the sun. So that's what I read. I don't know, it could be completely wrong, but that's...
Well, according to Felix's saying, the fat part isn't good.
Yeah, okay. Well,
so who knows?
But you could still be right, because the fat part was added on subsequently. The original saying only had the first
part. Fair enough. So in your clinic, where you're not doing surgery, what sort of modalities of skin treatment do you guys have? And maybe break it down into lasers and devices versus injectables.
Yeah. So I think in terms of lasers, we have a pigment laser and we have a vascular laser, so we kind of combine them together, so we're treating all the chromophores that we can get to. The pigment laser we use is Picosure. I think there's the main reason why we use Picosure, other than the fact that it's very consistent in pigmentation, in complexion, is also because of that difference in absorption for a 755 nanometer laser that generates IOBs very consistently. So we can do a little bit of sort of like new collagenesis, this promotion of new collagen, and we get the skin that is smoother to see, smoother to touch. And I think actually, because it holds water better, it's probably more resilient to aging as well. So I think that's one half of it. The other half of what we do, we use this device from Denmark called Advertex. I'm not sure if it's there in Australia.
No.
Great device. It's a solid state yellow. So it's a 589 nanometer that produces energy very consistently. So unlike the kind of like say gas or liquid medium ones, whereby the energy that comes out is little, or it gives a lot of energy in total. But unlike a long pulse laser, these energies don't come in spikes. So weakness, therefore, is you can't really treat stuff like telangiectasia, port wine stains. But for redness, skin sensitivity, acne, it does fantastic. So we kind of chose these two, right? Because we want to target the browns and the reds, and they work together or separately to sort of like treat the majority of skin goals. And when it comes to skin injectables, I think in general, not in our clinic, but in general, there are, I think skin boosters really refer to everything. But currently in Asia, there are many, many types of skin boosters, as you can imagine, because as you said, skin is such a revered thing. So of course, when there's a demand, there's a supply, right? So we have traditional skin boosters, which is just non-cross-link HAs. Right, we have long-lasting skin boosters, which is slightly cross-linked HAs, and then we have this thing from Korea called Rejuran, which is derived from salmon sperm, I think, and the goal, of course, is growth factors to stimulate repair, anti-inflammation, and the generation of new collagen. Nowadays, we have Profhilo. Profhilo really is just a HA, but it's designed in a way that spreads on its own. So instead of injecting like 100 injections for the whole face, you're injecting just 10. So there's that. And of course, the latest to come out is Exosomes.
Yes.
Exosomes is one of these things that I think it's so new, but I do think that it is truly the future in terms of cell signaling. I don't know about Australia, but in Singapore, any product that comes from a human is never, ever going to be approved for injection. So then people are saying, if you just applied it, even if you absorb like 1% of it, it already kickstarts a cascade that gets this sort of like intended mechanisms going. You don't actually need all of it to work. But I just think that exosomes is one of these things that I do believe is the future, but we need to observe it much more closely before we say, this is a good treatment for everybody.
Just quickly, just getting back to lasers for a second, I know that sort of in my experience with running clinics that had lasers, the patients that were always at risk of hyperpigmentation or unusual reactions was always your Asian patient because of more melanin and more sensitive. So how do you sort of allow for that or sort of de-risk those laser treatments, especially when you're like hitting someone with a 755 or a 589 with the chromophore is melanin? How do you sort of circumvent that risk or reduce it?
Well, a few things. I think first and foremost, let's just get it out of the way. Consent is really important. So we always consent for post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. Yeah. If I'm firing at 300 freckles, one of them's going to get PIH, right? And the patients kind of accept that. You tell them it's kind of like a mark left behind by a pimple. It goes away by itself. It goes away quicker with treatment. So just letting them make that choice for themselves, I think is important. And if the pigment load is really too high, sometimes you can split instead of one session, you can do it in two. Yep. But usually I'll just let the patient decide on this based on her own risk profile. What we do in our clinic to reduce the risk of PIH is many. I think from pre-treatment, before the patient comes for the laser, we like to pre-treat the skin with vitamin C if possible. Yep. I think or any antioxidant really. We want the patient to keep the skin hydrated, sunblocked for at least 2 weeks before the laser treatment and at least 2 weeks after. And during the treatment itself, we use surface cooling. I think that's really important. I think if you have a pigment laser and you're treating freckles, you have to invest in a surface cooler. It's
Zimmer
cheap.
Or something?
Zimmer. Yeah. So we use a Cryo 6, but it really, you just have to have it. I just feel like, especially with pico lasers nowadays, we aren't cooking and vaporizing the pigmentation, right? We are vibrating and shattering it. We don't need the heat. The heat is a byproduct, right? So, but yet the heat is what pushes the risk of the PIH. So I think surface cooling is really important. And after lasers, two things. Number one would be post-laser creams. Yeah. I think this is something that I think everyone has an opinion on. You can use steroids, you can use hydroquinone, you can use a combination of both. What we do here is we do a combination of both, but we do both at very gentle doses, and we cover it with moisturizers. I think that's really important as well, because of course, the faster you recover, the faster you cut the inflammation, and we advise the patient to stay out of the sun. It's really hot here in Singapore, so we advise them to stay out of the sun for at least a week, and by that we mean strict sun avoidance. So when you cross the road, bring an umbrella, that kind of thing. Yeah. And in the end, I think PIH is a risk that you cannot avoid when you're treating an Asian community with lasers, especially if you are treating superficial pigmentation like freckles or horiz nevus. Yeah. But if you did all these, I would say the overall rate is not high. Okay. We see maybe 1 or 2 a year at most, and everyone is a darker kind of like pigmented skin. So I think we
Okay.
Can I wheel you back to Rejuran? That's why I'm going to Korea to go to the global symposium and learn about it. So what is it, like, super briefly, and like how does that differ to, say, Profhilo, for example, like the results?
Now the interesting thing about the results, at least Profhilo, if you do it on label, you do it the way they taught you, you are not injecting the forehead at all.
Yes.
Remember we were talking about fine forehead lines and wrinkles. So that it poses a little bit of a problem, even though now Profhilo is saying that we can inject the forehead, especially with a cannula for safety. And I think one of the reasons why it wasn't part of the equation to begin with is because Rejuran is ideally injected intradermally. Yeah. So when you inject Rejuran, you get a bleb, a big visible bleb. So the product is in the skin, versus Profhilo, where the product is injected subdermally. So you kind of feel a little bump, but you don't really see a bleb. So obviously you can imagine that injecting subdermally or subcutaneously with a sharp needle with HA leads to risk, especially in the forehead. So I think that may be the reason why Profhilo never thought forehead when it first came out, right? So the gist is Rejuran is not HA. It's really just salmon DNA, right? And a lot of people do mix it as a cocktail. So you would mix, let's say, Rejuran with a non-cross-link HA with, say, a small amount of Botox, or in countries where it's legal, things like tranexamic acid, depending on what you're trying to do for the patient, and inject it at once as a cocktail, right? A word of caution here: if you're not familiar with Rejuran, fans of IA, do not mix it with a cross-link HA. You cannot do that, because there's several reported cases of lumpiness,
right?
And these lumps is not the HA lump. It's I don't know, Okay. So in general, just mix it with a non-cross-link HA. I'm not entirely sure what the interaction is between Rejuran and BDDE, but there's just been enough reported cases for us to not do that.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, no cross-linking.
And so the result is, it's better skin, right? It also helps healing.
Yes.
There's no, unlike Profhilo, because there's no HA, what's the hydration sort of capacity like? Or is it more for skin quality rather than hydration?
Interestingly, I feel like if you do mix it with a HA, I kind of feel like it gives better results than Profhilo, because skin hydration is one of those things that is, we can report it with all sorts of devices, but really what the patient feels is the most important. And I think that patients generally have very, very high satisfaction rates when it comes to both Rejuran and Profhilo injections. So in general, how do I choose in my clinic, right? I feel like if you don't have dry skin or a skin problem, you just want maintenance, I'll probably choose Profhilo for you. It's easier.
Yeah.
But if you do have a lot of lines, your skin's dry, sensitive, you actually want to see a market improvement, I find Rejuran to be somewhat more consistent.
Okay.
But
interesting.
I think they're both good.
I'm excited.
That's great. Yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm excited about the Rejuran. I'll be your test case, Jake. No problem.
Well, I might have some coming in the post soon.
There you go.
So there we go. It's TJ approved, by the way. This isn't dodgy. We've got just a few minutes left. We've got a million questions to ask, but I just want to ask you 2 or 3 other questions that we sort of traditionally did with our Beauty of the World one. So what toxin brands do you have available in, well, at least Singapore, not Asia, but Singapore?
Well, I think the 3 main brands would be Botox, Elegant Botox, Xiumin, and Dysport.
Okay. No Latibo, no Nobota, no Daxify.
I just don't want to say something wrong, because there are some Korean toxins that are approved in Singapore, but I'm not exactly sure which ones.
Okay. So are you implying there's a bit of a black market, imported naughty products that sometimes come into the country?
Well, it's always been here. It's whether it's non-HSA approved, like authority approved, or whether it's parallel imported, it's always been here. But I think the key here really is to just go to a regulated clinic with a reputable doctor.
Yeah. And so doctors only injecting, no nurses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I gather, I think you told me when I last saw you, there's only about 200 or 300 injectors for the whole country. Is that correct?
Probably.
Oh, Jake's on the move.
I'm moving. I'll be 301. I'll just deal with all the expats.
Yeah. See if you like it here when you're here in September.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, exactly.
You can go to work in shorts. There you go.
Yeah. And this is, I don't know if you can answer this off the top of your head. What does it cost to buy Botox for you as the doctor? Like, I just want to get some idea of how expensive it is.
Am I allowed to say this?
Yeah, of course you can.
Well, I think without bonusing it, it's 550 Singapore dollars, I think.
All right, I'm going to work this out. That is, that's expensive. And that's for you to buy.
Yeah. But
okay.
this is if you bought one bottle alone.
Yeah.
So if you bought,
Well, 629 Australian. That's freaking expensive.
Yeah.
What is it in Australia?
Well, if you bought one box, it would be $555.71.
Yeah.
The
Black Diamond, Red Dragon.
Well, I was going to say, presumably you have a tiering or a volume-based, I guess, incentive in a way to buy more. So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, anecdotally in America, fillers particularly are expensive. So we've just sort of tried to contrast the various regions. What about for a mil of, you don't have to name a brand, but a sort of a thick filler, like a high G prime filler? What might that cost you for a box or a mil for you to buy?
A single syringe, I would say, if I averaged the cost of the top 4 brands, probably between $300 and $350.
$350?
$300, $350.
Okay, so yes, that's $400 for 1 mil cost price. That's exy.
It is. Very exy.
Yeah. So, I mean, presumably, you'd have to tell us your prices, but would you say that, when you look at other prices around the world, that Singapore, you charge a lot because it costs a lot for you to buy?
Well, now that I have had a chance to travel around the world to teach, I realized that, and we have to take this offline, there's crazy stuff everywhere.
So when Felix turns up with 5 empty suitcases.
Yeah.
And I get to see Australia as well.
So I'll see you on an episode of Border Security at some point.
Again, I'm sure there's a lot of variability. I heard in China it's very expensive for filler. Like, $2,000 a mil or something insane.
Wow.
Is that true?
Let me do some math. It's not that crazy.
But expensive, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So maybe I move to China instead then. Okay. See you later. Nice knowing you guys.
IA International.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Well, look, we had 100 other questions. Maybe we'll just end on a couple of business questions.
Yeah, so I'll just ask a few business questions. I know you're a doctor, so if you can't answer them all, I'll forgive you. So, do you have any idea about the approximate market size? So, you said there's only 200 or so doctors performing aesthetic treatments. Like, what do you know? Any idea about patient numbers? Like, how many people are out there, or your market penetration?
Oh, I have no idea. What I can say to that is that I feel like our practice is more or less shaped by the needs of our patients, right?
Yeah.
So initially in Singapore, aesthetics was something that was hush. You had to be a celebrity, a rich person, and you had to know people to do it. And over the last 10 years, it's become something that's everybody wants to do now.
Yeah.
But there's some barriers as to is this safe? Will it make me look weird? Will it make me look like a celebrity? And now that's better now. And I feel like as the industry is evolving, we're getting more and more market penetration. But in terms of a number, I don't really know.
Okay.
But I would just guess and say that it isn't as high as the other countries in Asia.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of the growth, do you sort of have any, does it look like it's getting busier? Are you having less patients per provider, or there's still more patients than there are providers in terms of the demand? You've got like a 6-week waiting list or whatever. Yeah, that'd be nice, right? But nice. What does that growth trajectory look like in your opinion? Are you sort of quite positive that it's continued, that the market penetration is going to continue to increase?
I think it kind of separate between my clinic and Singapore as a whole.
Yeah.
In my clinic, we work in such a way whereby we don't do marketing, we don't do advertising, so it's all word of mouth. So the growth is really steady, right? It just grows year on year. It just gets more, I guess, to the point whereby my appointments are full and we can't grow anymore. So I think that's us. But Singapore as a whole, I do think that the market is actually growing, even though there are more and more clinics.
Okay.
So the reason why I say that is because I think that acceptance to doing an aesthetic treatment is becoming more and more prevalent in Singapore, and we're kind of like catching up with our neighbors in that sense. The flip side to this, of course, is that and we spoke at the beginning about how education can be very non-formal and non-structured, and we spoke about how non-doctors can open aesthetic clinics.
Yeah.
And so when this becomes more prevalent and patients may go somewhere and get disappointed or go somewhere and get a complication. So once again, that affects sort of like that growth in a whole. But I think if you just look at the bigger picture, because most of us are doing good jobs, the patients are just accepting this more, and they are sort of like opening themselves up to more and more sort of like ideas about how to treat themselves better.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think's the biggest challenge running your own practice?
Well, the biggest challenge, I don't know. I'm having so much fun. I think we just got a second doctor on board. She's a very, very talented young lady. So of course, like both of you, we spend a lot of time doing education. I think just a very multifaceted job. And nowadays, when you see the patients, it's I don't know if you guys feel this way, but 5 or 6 years ago, right, when I first started injecting somewhat well, I was kind of like, wow, that's really, really nice. And I'm really happy that's made a difference to the patient. The patient comes back. After injection, she feels a certain way. She comes back, she feels a certain way. And you felt like you've made a positive impact to that person. Like all these years later until now, I still feel this way. Like every case just makes me happy. So I think it's just a great job that we have, to me, I think we're doing a happy kind of medicine. Most of our patients leave our clinics better than when they came in. And I think we're just very fortunate that. So I guess the biggest challenge would be to do anything not related to doctoring. You gotta do, I don't know, administrative stuff and all that. But I guess it's just a necessary evil. It's boring, but it's fine.
Sure, can relate.
And last question. Where are we going with all of this? What's the future of injectables? What do you see, or what have you heard coming in the next few years that might change or revolutionize what we're doing?
I'm just going to be a little bit boring and say that what we're doing right now, it's normal to me, it's normal to you. It may not be normal to every doctor out there, right? We're still talking about filling faces, or the opposite of let's not overfill faces. It's just fill, and fill. Let's fill more. Let's not fill too much. I think what we're doing, where we are sort of like supporting the patient's faces, I think we're going beyond making her look good. We're actually, I think, slowing down that process at which age changes her face. And I do think that in the end, in the 10 years to come, this is going to be the method that everybody is gonna be using in one form or another, just because that's the thing that the patient wants. The patient wants to look like a younger, better version of herself, and not puffy. And I think this is an unsexy answer to give, but I truly think that stuff like education, stuff, like what you guys are doing a great job with the IA podcast.
Thank you.
Whatever you do today, you kind of like see the results in a few years' time, because you're changing minds, and then you change practices, and then you change, and that comes in a few years. So at least for me, as both an injector and educator, that's my hope. That we're creating good results, and that brings people confidence to do aesthetic treatments.
Yeah, I'll accept that answer.
Good. I really enjoyed that. Honestly, we had so much more material, and we could probably do a second part to this. But I'm really glad that we got that under our belt.
That's
David.
good. It's good. It feels like the circle is being almost complete now.
Yeah,
we've covered the major continents. So thanks for your time. It was great to meet you. I haven't met you in person, but looking forward to meeting you soon. And now that you're part of our Patreon group, you can get all the feedback that everyone's probably going to give you when this episode comes out in a few weeks.
2 or 3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks. So thank you again.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I really look forward to seeing you in Singapore in, like 2 weeks now, I think.
Yes. No, thanks so much. Before I became a Patreon, I was already like watching this on Jake's Instagram. I just think you guys are doing a wonderful job. Bringing the I don't know. Can I say this? The gist is, I think everybody has sort of like their professional opinion on how aesthetics is or what we do, and you guys are sharing your precious opinion, but you guys are also bringing on board the opinion of a lot of experts, right? So you're kind of like, I don't know if I'm right to say this, you're kind of like, we're giving you this information, do with it what you will, but this is good information for you, and I think that's just amazing. Just thank you a lot for doing that, and thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you, Felix.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Buddy. I really appreciate this. Lovely feedback, and I'll buy you a beer now.
Or two.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, and we'll have to see you in Australia soon. So
come and see us.
Yes, we'll
5 empty suitcases.
Absolutely.
Just bring your umbrella.
Yeah,
you're going to need it. See you, buddy. Take care.
Thanks, Felix.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks, buddy.
For our latest news, follow us on Instagram at Inside Aesthetics Podcast. If you want to get in touch with myself or David, follow us on Instagram as well at Dr. Jake Sloan and David_Inside Aesthetics.
Join our IA Patreon platform for invaluable business and injectable education. Get access to our global community of like-minded professionals, live and interactive Zoom sessions, hints and tip videos, webinars, and more. Head over to www.insideaesthetics.com/Patreon for more information.